Members, it's the appointed time and we have a quorum. Let's get started. This meeting is scheduled to end at 6 p.m. If necessary, I'll extend this meeting by at most 15 minutes. If you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the discussion items today, please, in accordance with paragraph 83A of the Rules of Procedures, disclose the nature of such interests before you speak. Also, please bear in mind paragraph 84 of the Rules of Procedures in relation to voting with direct pecuniary interests. Agenda item 1, FCR, bracket 2025268. This item seeks approval of the recommendation of the Establishment Subcommittee made at its meeting on the 2nd of April 2025. It is EC bracket 202242515, retention of one-time limited supernumerary post of Senior Principal Executive Officer, D2, in the food branch of the Environment and Ecology Bureau for a period of 3 years with effect from the 26th of June this year or with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee, whichever is later, to continue to take forward various tasks relating to food safety, food supply, and the facilitation of export of Hong Kong food products. As the ESC did not recommend the paper for further discussion by the Finance Committee and no less than 3 members had jointly requested FC to discuss it further, FC will, therefore, in accordance with paragraph 3A of the FC procedures, follow the recommendation of the subcommittee and will not discuss this paper further. I now put FCR bracket 2025268 to vote. Will members in favor of this paper please raise their hands? Those against? Dr. Teck Chi-yun is against the proposal set out in the paper. I believe that the majority of the members present are in favor of the proposal. This proposal is approved. Agenda item 2, FCR bracket 2025269. This item invites members to approve the creation of a new commitment of $200 million under the Innovation and Technology Fund Head 111 Innovation and Technology for implementing the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park Incubation Support Program for Life and Health Technology Startups. The ITIB as well as the ITC consulted the panel on Commerce, Industry, Innovation and Technology on the 19th of November 2024 on this proposal. We have with us Professor Sun Dong, Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry. We also have Commissioner for Innovation and Technology, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of the Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park Limited. I now ask Chairman of the Panel on Commerce, Industry, Innovation and Technology to report to us about the discussion. On the 19th of November 2024, we had a discussion at the panel about the creation of a new commitment of $200 million under the INT Fund to implement the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park Incubation Support Program for Life and Health Technology Startups. Members, in general, support the submission of this proposal for the scrutiny by the Finance Committee. Members are concerned about the operation of the incubation support program. Members are of the view that if the incubation program only provides a subsidy for 2 years for startups, it will be too short. Also, members asked a number of questions about how startups will be selected under the incubation support program. The administration replied to members' questions and concerns at the meeting. Thank you. 16 members have asked to speak. I'll read out the names. Mr. Lam Chun Sing, Ms. Chen Yut Ming, Dr. Chow Man Kong, Mr. Shanghai Long, Mr. Tang Fei, Dr. Johnny Mr. Edmund Wong, Mr. Chen Xiu Hong, Mr. Michael Tin, Mr. Kitson Yang, Professor Priscilla Leung, Mr. Yim Kong, Dr. Wendy Hong, Professor William Wong, Ms. Elizabeth Quat, and Ms. Eunice Yong. First, Mr. Lam Chun Sing, please. Thank you, Chairman. This program will allow startups to carry out researches, and it will help with the launch of products. It is mentioned in the paper that if the progress is not satisfactory, the government can withdraw the funding or recover the funding disbursed. I want to know how you consider whether the progress is not satisfactory. Say the startup has already reached the pilot scale production stage and it is close to the end of the research stage. Would this be considered as not satisfactory? Will you be more lenient in terms of allowing startups to carry out the projects? Also, the US has staged the tariff trade war. We can't rule out the possibilities that there might be other countries that will sanction Hong Kong in the future. And this might involve the life and health technology sector. There could be startups that plan to implement certain projects, but because of geopolitical reasons, the projects might not be able to go ahead. This will be out of the control of startups. Will you consider that the progress is dissatisfactory if startups face situations like this, or will you give room for startups to change their proposals or plans and continue to offer support to them under such circumstances? Secondly, we want to know how the funding will be used and whether the funding will be used effectively. Will there be KPIs? I know that you put startups into different stages, like the initiation stage, incubation stage, and the acceleration stage. Will you ensure that there will be a certain number of startups that can go from the initiation stage to the incubation stage? Will you have KPIs like this? Professor Sun Dong, I'll ask Mr. Lee to address the questions. Mr. Lee, please speak closer to the microphone. We can't hear you clearly. Thank you, Chairman. I thank Mr. Lam for the two questions. Mr. Lam is right that there are uncertainties to any R&D projects, and we cannot guarantee 100% success rate to these projects. So we have to look at the actual circumstances. Say an R&D team is dedicated to carrying out an R&D project, and the outcome is not as expected. We will exercise discretion to allow the team to make adjustments to the proposal or plan. We have to, of course, look at whether the changes are reasonable. We won't allow the changes if the team didn't do anything. We will ask relevant experts to confirm whether the progress is up to expectation. The second question is about how effectively the funding will be used. We hope that startups that are included in the different stages will be able to achieve what they plan to do. We will collect information to see whether the relevant team can produce the product prototype as promised and whether relevant patents has been applied for. We'll also look at the operation of the enterprise. We will keep in view all this information. Is this information or statistics made public? I think we will definitely be able to make these statistics public. Ms. Chen Yutming, Chairman, this proposal is about the Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park and the Life and Health Technology sector. In Shenzhen and Shanghai, there are specific policies in relation to funding support for medical devices and newly invented medication. This proposal from the government concentrates more on incubation. I want to know how this funding scheme will be able to promote the market to procure the incubated products. It is mentioned in the paper that there will be milestone assessment. Can the administration tell us what kind of criteria will have to be met under the milestone assessment? It is also mentioned in the paper that if progresses are not satisfactory, the government can ask for the return of the disbursed funds. Can you tell us what you mean by unsatisfactory progress? 3 questions, Professor Sun. Thank you. I want to ask the HSITP Limited's CEO, Mr. Ma, to address the questions. CEO, please. Thank you. In relation to how we are going to select the relevant startup teams or enterprises, we attach importance to the proposal, and there should be different milestones included in the proposal. We have 3 stages under the program: the initiation stage, the incubation stage, as well as the acceleration stage. These stages will cover different companies, and the companies during the funding period, they have to achieve certain milestones at different periods. They have different goals, so they will achieve different targets. We will talk to each company to come up with a reasonable milestone. We hope that the milestones will help the startup teams commercialize the R&D outcomes. We hope that they can get to the clinical trial. That's what we are going to ask the selected companies to do. The milestones will be set at the initial stage. Fundings will be dispersed across several years. There might be changes throughout the funding period. On a half-yearly basis, we will review whether the milestones have been achieved. And based on the review, we will disperse the funding. So we will closely monitor the performance of the startup teams. There might be uncertainties concerning the big environment. As mentioned by the Commissioner, we will exercise discretion and allow the startup teams to make changes to the initial proposal. Our target is to help startup teams commercialize and realize their R&D outcomes. This is our greatest target. Concerning the point about recovering the disbursed funds, as mentioned when we review the milestones, well, they will have to report to us what they have achieved and what not. There might be extreme cases in which the startup teams or companies have not achieved anything. We will deal with these cases separately. However, for individual items which could not be achieved, we might exercise discretion.
Next, Professor Chow Man Kong. Thank you, Chairman. We have an aging population in Hong Kong. Therefore, there is a need to develop more life and health technology projects. It seems that the HSITP will be responsible for dispersing the funds. Would actually someone be sitting in on the panel to help us assess the development. And during the assessment, would you actually require startups at the acceleration stage to reinvest part of its profit into further R&D to sustain the project? In the paper, we see that we welcome applications from startups, but then it seems that those who have received funding from the government before would not be welcome. Many of these projects are actually conducted by universities. Well, would startups actually be affected by this criteria? Professor Sun. I'll defer to Mr. Lee. Thank you. The HSITP is actually an independent entity with its own board of directors. On individual application, assessment, and the reports to be submitted, this would be followed up by the HSITPL. What we do at the ITC is to actually look into the submitted annual reports, to look at their work during the year and the outcomes, and then we would in cash disperse the funds to HSITPL. But then as to the regular operations, we would defer to the HSITP. I'm not quite sure about the second question. Do you mean that when startups receive profits, would they reinvest the profits into further R&D? Yes, that's the question. Well, I'm sure they will do that. Well, thank you, Chairman. Well, this is up to the decision of the startups. Usually, when startups want to expand, then of course they would reinvest, because I'm sure that with just one research project, I don't think they will be able to sustain. As to the third question, all of these subsidized projects must follow a criteria of not allowing double dip, which means double the funding. I, however, would like to emphasize that even though there is not a double funding, we are talking about the same project. However, if an university has received funding on something on life related to life and health, and then it moves on to a project on another theme or topic that has not yet received government funding before, they could still apply for the funding and would still be eligible for the funding. Thank you. Mr. Zhang Hailong. Thank you, Chairman. I really like to thank the government for following up on the work on the Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park, and now we're finally being able to see startups moving into the park. I have a few questions based on the paper. First of all, I'd like to ask Terence, our CEO, some well, compared to the Science Park and Cyberport, what is actually your competitive advantage? How do your companies differ from those companies in these two other parks? And I'd like to refer you to paragraph 19. Other members, when they see the proposed commitment of 200 million, that all of it would be given to the HSITPL, but then you see that this, but then it seems that they will bear the administrative expenditure of the incubation program. So how much money would actually be given to the startups? Well, you said that there should not be any double dipping. It seems that the science park in the past 2 decades have already helped about 850 startups, out of which 40% are related to life and science startups. Many of them have received public funding, such as a rent-free or about a 500,000 fund. Well, let's say the startup has closed down, but then the founder now comes over to HSITP and then submits a new application. So are you going to to approve the application? Well, because I have also seen like 107 applications before on those same topics. So how are you going to, and it seems that if it's easy, then you can help them move into the next stage. We see around 100 odd companies are waiting to be listed on the Hong Kong Exchange. We see a large majority of companies involved in life and health technology. I hope that the HSITP will work with the Hong Kong Exchange to provide more support and then to help bring in more life and health technology related startups to the HSITP. 3 questions. Professor Sun, or can Mr. Ma take the first question? Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. Well, you asked about the difference between HSITP, Cyberport, and Hong Kong Science Park. The edge on HSITP is that we are under the 14th five-year plan, and we are the only one IT platforms which is in fact very close to our motherland. So we'll be able to leverage on a one country, two systems policy. This is actually quite unique. Under different circumstances, the central government has suggested that there would be more key startups going into HSITP. We are talking about 87.7 hectares of land today, which are being released gradually. And these could be put in use very quickly. We have already completed 3 buildings, and the other 5 are under construction. And we can also look for PPP partnerships. Land is a very valuable resource. We will be able to provide land and space for startups as needed. And this is one of our competitive edges and one of the reasons why we will be able to attract more startups into Hong Kong. I think administrative costs, no, the 200 million will all be used on the startups. And then for the administrative expenditure, then this would not come out of the 200 million. On Mr. Zhang's question, and that for companies that have already received government funding before, would they be eligible for this funding? I'm sure that each company is in a different development stage, and then even when they're at different stages, they're unable to receive funding. It doesn't mean that they would not be eligible to apply for new applications. The only setback is that they could not apply with the same proposal. So I think that the assessment panel will keep an eye on that. You might have noticed that in the past, many companies coming to listed in Hong Kong are actually companies related to life and science technology. Well, this shows how outstanding our IT development is. For example, for some of the, we see that we can actually, we see that the next step, we need to ensure that those companies that could become listed in Hong Kong could work with the universities here. We must, of course, give them some time. We were able to start up in 2023, and then our startups can then move into 2024 in the Hong Kong Science Park, in the R&D Center, and then some of them can become listed this year. Next year, there would also be new startups coming into Hong Kong to start their development. Thank you. Mr. Tang Fei. I'll have a question on paragraph 18 and 19. While 200 million would be spent on the startups, it seems that within 2 years period, there would be about 70 startup teams and enterprises, which means that on average, about 2.85 million a year. So it's 1.47 million per year. And there would be about 2 employees plus the boss. So 3 people, and putting aside rent, we're talking about a 470,000 pay salary per year. That's not very competitive. Well, I'm not saying that all the funds must come from public money. But this funding is really not a lot compared to nearby countries. We're actually being quite stingy compared to other countries. Would we actually add more later on? Which leads me to the second question. Has the government actually drawn reference from other authoritative places? Well, there's also a pie indicator on life and health technology on the mainland. Should there also be similar indicators or standards that we could introduce into Hong Kong? And can we actually disclose these KPIs? I'm always concerned that startups which can move into commercialization does not mean that they're really high value products, because life and health technology may actually just be a slight change to a current drug. It may be a simple change. It doesn't need to have too high of a significance, but it may work well. Do we have any KPIs that could actually guide our startups, that they could actually move towards more high-end technology? Professor Sun, well, 2 questions. The 200 million is based on the 2023 policy address or budget, in which we're going to spend on life and science technology. And then in 2025 to 2026 budget, we introduced that we are going to spend money on startups. Well, that's all the money we have. Well, we believe that with this plan, we can first bring it forward. Well, I believe that this is something worth doing. As to how much each startup will get, well, this is up to the HSITP team. Of course, it must be approved by the board of directors. The government will look at the general picture. Well, we would look at the 3 main programs, from initiation to incubation to acceleration. And we would also draw reference from the funded programs from the Hong Kong Science Park. Well, we hope that there will be more seed projects But then as to how much money, it is up to them to decide on that. Well, for the incubation stage and acceleration stage developments in Science Park, we see that they're talking about 6 million. Well, I think that, of course, we need to use those indicators to help us look into the money that should be given during the acceleration stage. Well, Mr. Tang believes that we should increase the support, and of course we'll assess it in 2 or 3 years. Life and health technology is a bit different from other sectors. It takes quite a long period of time for development. Therefore, in Hetao or in the HSITP, we are going to provide funding for development. Well, as to the KPI, I think we should believe that the HSITP will be able to exercise the discretion. Thank you.
Next, Dr. Johnny Ng. Thank you, Chairman. I support this incubation support program. The Hong Kong Science Park as well as the Cyberport have had a lot of experiences in this kind of incubation programs. A lot of unicorns are from the Cyberport as well as the Hong Kong Science Park. I believe there will be more new projects happening in the HSITP. And they will mainly be life and health tech projects. I have a question about administrative cost. It is mentioned in the paper that the admitted enterprises will have to carry out the administrative work in Hong Kong. We all want these projects to take place in Hong Kong. And so we will need staff to help monitor these projects. We need help. We need to offer them help in terms of monitoring their R&D work, for example. So how much manpower will there be for this? Just now, the Secretary mentioned that only $200 million will be allocated to this project. Projects concerning life and health tech span a long cycle. Are there plans to continue to help these companies raise funds? We have the Hong Kong Investment Incorporation, and we have over $1 billion under the Hong Kong Investment Corporations. Are there ways to help these startups look for funds after the $200 million are spent? I'll ask Mr. Ma, the CEO, to address the first question. A question about manpower, Mr. Ma. This is a new company set up under the incubation program, so we don't have a lot of manpower at this stage. We look at other practices in other places, and it looks like we have to have good interface between this sector and other industries. We need companies from other sectors to help us with the incubation program. This will help save time for us to build a team ourselves. To industrialize these startup companies, we need support measures in the upstream and downstream. So we have to work with the relevant enterprises in the different streams. So we will rely on the forces from other sectors to help us. The other question is, are there other fundraising channels after the $200 million are exhausted? we need to adopt a targeted approach. Apart from this incubation support program, we have other existing programs. Recently, with the help of LegCo, we rolled out some new programs. This includes the INT scheme as well as the INT Industry-Oriented Fund, New Industrialization Acceleration Scheme, and so on. So we have enough schemes in place to complement each other. A startup team, for it to grow, they need funds, they need financing channels, and we have the HKIC. So this whole chain is becoming more and more complete. So there will be support at different stages for these startups. Mr. Edmund Wong. Chairman, I support this incubation program. The $200 million will be dedicated to supporting life and health tech startups. This will ensure the development in this area. The whole program will cost $200 million, but it's not mentioned in the paper how much money each enterprise or startup will get. Each startup, be it at the initiation, incubation, or acceleration stage, they can join the program. So at each stage, how much money can each startup get? Also, at different stage, there are different requirements and criteria. But it is only mentioned in the third stage that the relevant administration work will have to be carried out in Hong Kong. How come there is such a specific requirement for the third stage? Some enterprises, they have offices or branches in Shenzhen, and some have branches in other places. How come we have such a rigid requirement? Also, I want to ask about patent registration. Is there such a requirement? It is also mentioned in the paper that every 6 months there will be a milestone assessment. Just now the administration said there will be flexibility. Will the milestones be set by the applicants? If not, how will you come up with the milestones? How can you compress the timetable to ensure that the milestones can be achieved within a certain time? How can you strike a balance in this regard? Professor Sun, I'll ask Mr. Lee, the Commissioner, to address the questions. Mr. Lee, I thank the member for the questions. For at each stage, according to our program, upon the approval by FC, the Board of Directors of the HSITP will finalize the details of the program. For startups at the initiation stage, they will have to transform their concepts into a business plan, and the cost may be lower. It could be about $100,000 to $200,000. When startups get to the incubation and acceleration stage, they will have to come up with product prototypes. They will have to do more on marketing. They can get up to $2 million for that. When we come up with the framework, we will draw reference from practices in the neighboring cities or other places. We will leave it to the HSITP to finalize the details on this. It is mentioned in the paper that when it gets to the acceleration stage, the administrative work will have to be carried out in Hong Kong. Well, for the first 2 stages, the startup teams may not need a permanent office. It is about transforming a concept into a business plan. However, when it gets to a later stage, it is really about how we can realize the R&D outcomes and transform them into products. So we really want these startups, when they reach this stage, to establish presence in the park so that there could be more exchanges among the admitted enterprises so that they can help each other to expand their network. That's why we have this requirement. As for patent registration, we will encourage the relevant startups to register their patents in Hong Kong. But at the end of the day, we will respect the startup's decision. Some startups, they may register their patents in other places first, but at the end, we want them to register their patents here. About the point on milestone assessments, we ask the startups to tell us their proposal. There should be some milestones included in their original proposals when we conduct the assessment. Well, I believe the assessment panel, they will make observations, and if they want any adjustments to the original plan, they can talk about it. And they will sign an agreement with the startups which will set out all the milestones that need to be achieved. Mr. Wong, I have a follow-up question about patent registration. I understand that the R&D teams will register their patents in the major targeted markets. Well, the SAR government is going to disperse funding to them. Say they have their patents registered elsewhere, they can still have the patents registered in Hong Kong. This can help enrich our patents because we want to be a patent hub. If these startups can do so, it will reinforce the impression that they are benefiting us. So I don't see any conflicts between them registering their patents elsewhere and in Hong Kong. Mr. Lee. True, that's why we are not imposing this mandatory requirement on them to register their patents in Hong Kong. We just encourage them to do so. I think this is just a suggestion made by Mr. Edmund Wong. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, this incubation support program seeks to facilitate life and health tech startups to establish presence in the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park. I, in principle, support this program because this helps build the life and health tech ecosystem in Hong Kong. We all know that the cycle for life and health tech projects could be very long. It is different from other type of startup projects. So 2 years, $200 million, is that enough? On other occasions, including at the panel meeting, the Secretary said this is just a pilot scheme. Subject to further review, there could be extension to this incubation program. If more funding is required, the government may consider allocating more funding to the program. However, this ecosystem in the INT Park has just been built. Will you be more far-sighted? Will you not wait until 2 years later to conduct a review on the program? Will you consider consolidating resources to extend or expand this program? Now, when we make investments, we know that consolidation of resources is crucial. Just now, the commissioner said that the administration wants startups to establish presence in the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park. There are life and health tech startups that will consider setting up operations in the cyberport as well as the Hong Kong Science Park. They may choose to work with universities instead. So based on what will they consider establishing presence in the INT Park? Will the government consider consolidating the resources we have at different universities and different parks and make the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park as the leading park in Hong Kong on life and health technology to help build the relevant ecosystem. Also, according to paragraph 19 of the paper, there are expenditure for the 3 stages, and the total expenditure will be $200 million. According to the panel paper, the expenditure items under the 3 stages are different from those listed in this paper. For the first stage, it will cost $3 million. For the second stage, it will cost $99 million. And for the third stage, it will cost $98 million. This is the paper tabled for FC. However, according to the panel meeting, the first stage, it will cost about $130 million, and for the second stage, it will cost less. How come there is a difference in terms of the estimated expenditure?
第一个问题啊，
Professor Sun, first question on whether money is too little. Well, better this than none, right? So I think we should first start it up, and then you have to understand that we need time to actually set up the INT park. So under the current circumstances, I believe that 200 million is acceptable. And I thank Mr. Chen for calling upon an increase in funding in INT so often. For the second question, well, I believe that there's something we really need to take into consideration. To consolidate these companies, of course, would be beneficial, but then we also need to be multi-diversified. Within 2 few years, DeepSeek made a huge presence on the mainland, because 2 years ago we didn't even know what the 6 dragons were. Well, we find that there is intense overlapping, then of course we would consider it. But then currently with the 3 parks we have to the south Cyberport, and then in the Middle Science Park, and then towards the north we have the HSITP. Well, I believe that the incubation program is a bit different than those programs in the other parks. We can actually become unique in what we do, especially in the research and development of life and health technology. It could be data transition, or could be drug samples crossing the border. I believe that this is quite attractive to startups, and as this location is quite near the mainland, we can take this opportunity to also attract mainland startups to come over to Hong Kong. So the positioning is a bit different from that in Cyberport and Science Park. What's the third question? Oh, Mr. Lee can take this question. Thank you. Well, I can first answer the question on whether 2 years is too short, and then I would ask Vicky to supplement. Please be succinct. Well, first on the 2 years, we're talking about the initial cohort of 2 years. There would be 1 cohort per year. For those that could come into the HSITP, there would be a different time period. Let's say during the initiation stage, during ideation, we would request the company to actually industrialize the product, and then into the second stage, we'll talk about a 4 to 5 year period. As Mr. Chen said, R&D on life and science technology takes quite a long period of time. So if a company does well at one stage, then it could sort of graduate and move on to the next stage. And altogether, if they're able to go into all 3 stages, it might take 6 to 9 years, and then we will provide support along the way. Ms. Chung, thank you. Well, why is actually the estimate a bit different from what we showed to the panel? Well, last year, Mr. Ma discussed with the board of directors the details of the implementation. We looked into the estimated number of projects in each stage, or how many of them could move onwards. For example, from initiation to incubation, it might take a different period of time. Well, when we discussed at the panel, the estimate was a bit different, and today it is a bit more firm. Well, next time, if there are such changes, I believe that you should highlight it so that we all know about it. Well, Mr. Chan, you have already spoken for 8 minutes. Can you be brief? Well, yes, I agree with the chairman that if you have any changes in the numbers and figures, please highlight it in the future. Well, if 200 million is insufficient, there's actually a lot of money that you could allocate over. The development in the loop is very important. I think you should apply for more money, or as long as the startup can meet your criteria and will be able to leverage the competitive edge. I believe this is a very important message you need to send out. Mr. Yang Wen-kit, thank you. I want to follow up on the funding. Of course, I'm in support of the incubation support program for life and health technology startups. Well, I think that the money would not be sufficient, but then I agree with Professor Sun that it is better than nothing. Well, if you actually divide it up, you're talking about providing about 400,000 for a startup. Well, a potential startup would not see 400,000 as an appeal to come over. Let me tell you, in Nansha, if you move over there, you would first receive 120,000 as an incentive, and then you would receive about 5,000 to about 10,000 as a sort of bonus. Well, and then there would also be 200,000 to 2 million. So we're talking about these 20 different support funds. So if I'm a young team, I'm a startup team, where would I go? Of course, I would go to the one with more appeal. If you don't invest in this, I don't think you will be able to attract startups over. I'm sure you know that 1 or 2 successful cases out of 100 startups would, of course, be very outstanding. You're only giving 40,000 to a startup. I don't think you could attract startups to come over. Well, it's not even on par with the program under HAD, because there is at least 300,000 funding. Well, as there are so many different kind of funding support for startups, why don't you work together with other bureaus so that you can actually push up the funding amount? Could you actually discuss this between the different bureaus so that the funding provided would be an attraction for young people? Well, thank you for your support for IT. You're actually helping us ask for more money. I'd like to clarify on your 40,000 funding support. Well, we hope that we'll be able to receive more in the future. We're only talking about the first stage. On the initiation stage, let's say a $100,000 startup. Well, we would provide funding based on that stage, drawing reference from other parks. We believe that each startup will be able to receive a few million, but of course we're only talking about 10 to 20 startups receiving this huge amount of money. Well, this can show you, Mr. Yang, that during initiation stage, you have a concept, you have an idea. During the ideation period, you would only receive about 100,000, and then gradually towards the incubation stage and then acceleration stage, you would receive more money, even up to 6 million, depending on the size of the startup. Well, Mr. Yang is asking you to consolidate your resources. Mr. Chen Siu-hong also offered the same view. Would you consider this? Well, I'm not sure which area you're referring to on consolidation. Well, let me add on to that. Well, for the Youth Affairs Bureau, actually they also provide funding for programs. Maybe you could actually work with them and then to consolidate your resources so that it could provide as a higher appeal to young startups. Well, I'm sure each bureau is targeting a certain group of people in each of their funding programs. Well, this time we are trying to bring in startups working on life and health technology. Well, for those who would want to set up at the HSITP, as long as their program is different from what they've done before, then they're eligible to apply. Professor Priscilla Leung. I'd like to talk about paragraph 12. That we will look into the business potential project, social economic benefits brought by the project as part of the assessment criteria. So I would like to know whether you do have a standard for that. Well, I just came back from Hangzhou. I was at a conference and I had the opportunity to visit new technology outside of the Six Dragons. Well, you can wear glasses and it shows you 12 languages that can be translated immediately via wearing those glasses. Well, that has high potential. When you talk about commercializing a project, well, we see that, we think that this amount of money is not enough to support such development. Well, some IT people might just take the money out of their own pocket to work on that if they're interested. Well, we do have our outstanding universities in Hong Kong. When we go to Beijing, we say there's Tsinghua University, there's Communication University. When we go to Hangzhou, I see that all the young startups receive a lot of funding from the government. These people are all young, passionate people. We should try to look into how we commercialize our products. Recently, I met a financial expert who mobilized $800 million to support small companies to ride through difficult times. Well, that expert said that, well, once these companies have weathered through the storm, they would be able to develop even further. How can we really support young people? I think for these young startups to be successful, then we must ask or encourage them to work with businesses. I'm sure that businesses will be willing to fund such startups. Hangzhou is investing heavily into IT. Well, DeepSeek came from Hangzhou. Professor Sun, would you consider this? You actually may know the person I'm talking about. We should look for more such people to try to ask them to invest and mobilize more funds. 2 questions.
關於
I thank Professor Leung as well as Chairman. Now, assessment criteria. The HSITP team will work with external experts. I believe they will be a gatekeeper in this regard. On the assessment criteria, they will look at whether the idea is good, whether the startup team is strong, whether they have enthusiasm and passion. Is the proposal reasonable? They also look at their technical level. They can observe whether the startup teams are really committed to developing their projects here. So I'm confident with them. Well, we have enough resources for INT development. On different occasions, I have said that Hong Kong is an international financial center. However, we are not as advanced as other places in terms of our investment culture. However, we have seen changes recently. Some 2 years ago, the HKIC was established. We have enhanced versions of the INT fund this year. And next year, we will launch the INT industry-oriented fund. We hope to complete our ecosystem. You talked about Hangzhou. Earlier, I went to Hangzhou with the chief executive, and I communicated with the 6 little dragons. Indeed, the mainland government back in 2016, the Hangzhou government wrote out a 3-year project. They don't look at the background of the startups. Every year, they got 500 startups, each getting about $200,000. And they are still carrying on with the scheme. A lot of the startups, including 4 of the 6 little dragons, they started with the fund provided by the government. As for the 2 other dragons, they have other kinds of subsidies. What I'm trying to say is that the mainland government has been putting in a lot of resources into INT. Last year, the Hangzhou government put in 27 some billion RMB into startups. And this equals about 30 billion Hong Kong dollars. Last year, the SAR government subsidized about 8,000 startups, devoting about $18 billion. We are growing in this regard. Last year, we spent $16 billion, and the year before, about $15 billion. The money has been growing in terms of the resources we are putting in. Well, I'm happy that many members are asking me today why we are putting in so little money into this program. They are not asking why we are spending so much money, so we are seeing a change in the culture here. Mr. Yim Kong, I want to ask about the initiation fund, I think $150 million is not enough. Just now, according to the administration, for the first stage is about $100,000. The second stage is about $6 million. However, startups need the most amount of fund at the initiation stage because they may not be able to get to even the second stage. At the initiation stage, they have to have the proof of concept. And once they've established the proof of concept, they can build their business model. So my question is this. Say the concept is proven to work, and the startup concerned has spent all the $100,000 they've got. Can they ask for more funding even just at the initiation stage? Second question, according to the government paper, there will be an assessment panel to assess the applications. The assessment panel will comprise of people with experiences in investment and technology, but it is not mentioned whether there will be enough resources for the assessment panel members to assess the proposals. I mean, the members could be very busy. They may not have enough time to vet the applications. How will you resolve this? Also, will there be a declaration of interest mechanism for the assessment panel? Will the government introduce an external monitoring body over the assessment panel? Say there are conflicts of interest which are not declared. Will there be a monitoring mechanism for that? Professor Sun, I thank Mr. Yim for the questions. Yes, we'll have to prove whether the concept works at the initiation stage. We will think about whether the startup can ask for more funding. We'll leave it to the HSITP. Well, startups can go from the initiation stage to the incubation stage. If the first stage works, they should move on instead of staying at the same stage. We have to break new grounds because the HSITP is a new testing field. Secondly, on the point about monitoring the assessment panel, you mentioned about potential conflicts of interest. We ask the assessment panel to abide by the rules. I think this is a common sense. This is a culture that has been developed in Hong Kong for years. Of course, there needs to be a monitoring mechanism. The HSITP will report to the ITC from time to time, and the ITC will make reports to the government from time to time as well, and there will be internal auditing within the government. So I'm not worried about this. What I'm worried about is that there are too many rules now. If we can simplify the rules, it would be greater. I think we should, within reasonable means, simplify our rules. We should remove barriers and restrictions. Over the years, we've had different monitoring systems and mechanisms. When things happen, we resort to the monitoring mechanism. But now we have too many rules. I would like to take this opportunity to say that we should remove barriers where appropriate. I don't oppose what the member said. I do think that we should impose high standard to the assessment panel. Dr. Wendy Hong. The beneficiaries of the incubation program, according to the paper, all the administrative functions have to be conducted in Hong Kong when it gets to the acceleration stage. We have a number of universities in Hong Kong, that have devoted resources in life and health tech researches. What matters is how we transform the R&D outcomes and commercialize the outcomes. We need to make greater efforts in this regard. Can this incubation program offer what we need? Can we allow R&D outcomes generated in the mainland to be transformed in the HSITP? This is my first question. Secondly, according to the paper, there cannot be double benefits received by the selected startups. So once the startup gets the funding, does that mean the startup will not be eligible to apply for other kinds of subsidies? For example, will funding be able to be applied for under BUD fund or the fund for the research personnel? Well, the same questions have been asked by other members already. I'll ask Mr. Lee, the Commissioner, to reply to the second question. On the point about double benefit, we take a project as a unit, not the startup as a unit. To give you an example, say a startup under this incubation program has purchased certain equipment for its researches. It cannot apply for another funding for the same equipment. Say the startup has already produced a prototype and the startup wants to take part in exhibitions outside Hong Kong for marketing purposes. And if the startup has not received any funding under this program, in this regard, we will not stop that startup from applying for funding from other schemes, but we will strictly exercise the principle of no double benefit. Professor Sun. Regardless of the background of the startups, we want the startups to be able to commercialize their R&D outcomes in the loop. Some mainland enterprises, they have produced certain research outcomes in the mainland, and still they can come to Hong Kong and they can become more international and they can go global. So this is our thought. Next, Professor William Wong. There are 3 stages to technology transfer. In university, we talk about ideation first. Secondly, it's incubation. It's about growing the project. And the third stage is acceleration. This is all very standard. I am in the technology sector. And I know that for life and health tech projects, the life cycle is longer. So I wonder if the funding to be dispersed is not enough. It is mentioned that there should be KPIs. Normally, we look at the technical level of the projects. I wonder if this will be taken into consideration when you assess the proposals. Different staff may be hired or employed to execute the projects, and they have different skills. Do we have enough management capacity to assess the proposals? That's my question.
的问题啊。
Professor Sun, thank you, Professor Wong, for your question. or in the life and science technology, especially when it involves a treatment and drug use, then it would take a longer cycle. Therefore, we are not thinking of a success overnight. It does take time. We want it to be able to sustain. Well, ideation in the first stage, it is a bit short. It might take only a few months to a year, and then they would be able to move into the incubation stage and then to the acceleration stage. So it might take, it can be extended to 2 years or to 4 years according to the project needs. There would be other funding along the way, and when startups do well, they can also mobilize funds in Hong Kong, and investors would be willing to invest or acquire the startup. You are correct. The most difficult period is the first couple of years. This is the reason why the government is funding the first few years, as those are the most difficult years. And these startups already have worked in R&D for a period of time. We hope that with this funding, they would be able to speed up their R&D. We would also assess the startups in accordance with their stages. Of course, we could list out a list of KPIs for the startups, but then more importantly is not this. The ultimate success lies in whether they could commercialize it, and then to actually to conduct clinical trials and to the second or third stage. There's also the third question on management capacity. I am fully confident in the HSITP team. In the paper, they said they have their own team, and they would also defer to the expertise of those in the sector. Next, Professor Wong. Well, we all know where the question lies. This is just a suggestion. I raised the issue of management capacity because we don't know when you would need more people in the different stages. There are 3 stages. I think there should be more monitoring, and that would be more successful. Yes, I understand that. Although we didn't specify yet, with the approval of the board of directors, the second and third stage startups would not be too many. We'll talk about each stage. There would be about 20 odd such startups, and there are 2 cohorts, as said before. I believe that HSITP can handle that. There would be more startups in the initiation stage because, of course, we hope to attract more companies in that stage, and so that would not be as concentrated or intense. Ms. Elizabeth Quat, I am, of course, in full support of the Life and Health Technology Startup Incubation Support Program. We know that the most difficult period lies in the ideation stage, the initiation stage, and I'm happy to hear the commitment of 200 million from the government to support startups that have not been set up for more than 2 years. I am a bit concerned, though, that for startups, as the criteria is that they to be incorporated for no more than 2 years upon the application deadline. Let's say each company gets about 100,000. That means they still need to go through 2 or 3 years first before they receive the money. My suggestion is whether you would allocate more resources to the initiation stage. As you said, in Hangzhou, each startup gets about 200,000. For companies in the second and third stage, I'm sure the market would be interested in those development and perhaps provide funding for them. I believe startups need more funding in the initial stage to sustain their development. One of the largest expenditure for life and health technology startups would be a lot of equipment to be used in the laboratories. Based on the experience at the Hong Kong Science Park, those labs were actually very important to the startups because startups would not have the means to purchase such equipment. Support in laboratories for the second and third stage would be equally important, and there is no mention of that for the initiation stage as well. They don't have this support at SITP. So how are they going to conduct their laboratories? I want to know your timeline and your plan. How are you going to provide laboratory support to these startups to support them along every step of the way? Professor Sun, 2 questions. Well, thank you for your questions. Your first question is exactly the same question I asked the team when I met with them the first time. We are very open-minded. We have already been considering whether to earmark more resources for startups at the initiation stage. Well, if you change it again, then you have to reapply. Or some startups may only be a team of 1 or 2, or some graduate students have a couple of ideas and they spend a few months to try to market an idea. And if interested, then we could support them and help them move into the second and third stage immediately. The second question of yours is also very good. This is all under our plans. HSITP would also help support their tests. We know that startups do not have the means to purchase equipment for testing. So we are going to support them and to take up some smart space to set up common facilities for them. We are planning everything that you have just mentioned. Well, but of course, it is not included under this time. Yes, I'd like to remind members that there are only 3 members waiting to speak. So after Ms. Yong Ha-yen, Ms. Nixie Lam, and Mr. Simon Lee speak, then we'll be able to vote on the item. Ms. Yong Ha-yen, thank you. I'd like to declare that I'm actually a member on HSITP. Well, members have asked the secretary before that a success rate may be low for life and health technology startups. The percentage may be about 10 to 20% for life and health technology, and for medical technology or biotech, we're talking about 1.29 million for support, and for biotech programs there will be about 6 million in support. Many members have asked about the funding figures. Or compared to these programs, it seems that the support for this incubation support program is low. I know that Secretary have heard many of us say that there should be more money earmarked for the program. If the funding amount is too low, would actually that deter startups from applying for this program? Well, we see that Oasis has also try to attract people to move into the loop. For the incubation program, we are talking about 70 per year. Well, even though there is the support of the HSITP and actually a brand effect, how are you going to support these startups to have enough funding to work on their R&D? Secretary. Well, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Young, for your question. Well, many members have asked about the funding amount. Well, let me clarify again. We have already received approval from the Board of Directors. Other than the first stage, in which the funding is about 100,000 or 200,000, once startups move on to the second and third stage, we're talking about a few million in support. Or let's say to the acceleration stage, Cyberport provides about 6 million. I'm sure that we wouldn't be providing less. Well, if we talk about the biotech, it might be 6 to 7 million or even more. Even if all the startups work in life and health technology, there is a huge variety in the technology. And some may be on equipment, some may not need clinical trials. They have different needs, and I don't think that the amount they need would be equally the same, and I'm sure that our team of experts would assess it very carefully. At this stage, however, I'm sure that when startups move into the third stage, we're talking about a few $1 million at least. Ms. Yong asked about the low success rate having an impact on the number of applicants. Well, we only have that much money. Well, when startups apply, of course, it is good news for us because they want to help us develop. And I believe that we also need to provide a better support and ancillary facilities at the HSITP to attract more startups. Startups that are interested, we would want to attract them to come to HSITP as soon as possible. Ms. Nixie Lam, I've always been concerned with birth issues. Birth issues are also under life and health technology. In the past decade, we see that there has been lower quality in sperm and egg storage, and also there's a lower birth rate. Well, I want to see how we can leverage on this technology to help us enhance the birth rate. I've always been in support on life and health technology. Do you have any KPIs on the startups, whether you are seeking certain KPIs or whether after a certain period of time, if they're unable to achieve certain targets, would there be some sort of mechanism or for extension? We are investing money for development in this sector, but we should also ensure that the money is well spent and that we must assess the outcomes or even mid-term outcomes. Well, many members have suggested increasing the funding. Can the Secretary tell us more about this, especially after the conclusion of the incubation support program? What if they're not able to sustain during the period? What can they do? Well, the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme is the next item. What she wants to know now is how you can support the companies to grow in the different stages.
I I thank Ms. Lam for the questions. This program, as well as the other programs, they are tailor-made support programs for different enterprises. One major principle for incubation programs, that is, when startups have passed the initiation stage, they will move on to the incubation stage and the acceleration stage. For those who have completed the incubation stage, how many of them can get to pilot scale production and clinical test? These are hard indicators. I believe the assessment panel, when they vet the proposals, they will list out all the requirements that need to be fulfilled. When startups have completed a certain stage, they can move on to a later stage and they can get fundings from the government as well as other parties or organizations. So what is crucial is that they can successfully complete all these stages. Dr. Simon Lee. Thank you, Chairman. I am a director of a tech institute, and there might be relevance of my institute to this program. I think Professor Sun is very familiar with the cycle of life and health tech projects. I have a question. For service providers under the program, they cannot provide services to startups that are in the same fields as them. I understand this is to prevent conflicts of interest. However, these service providers may be the ones that are most familiar with these startups under the incubation program. Can there be a better balance in this regard? Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, I thank Dr. Lee for the questions. You mentioned about service providers. I believe you're talking about those that offer services to startups. Our thought is that we have Cyberport, the Hong Kong Science and Tech Park, and the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park. We are now focusing on the incubation support program in the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park. Mr. Vincent Ma, the CEO, has to ensure the success of this incubation program. Apart from the 3 platforms I mentioned, we have an incubation accelerator platform. It is different from the 3 parks that I mentioned. It supports overseas private enterprises. This is very popular in the US and in Europe. It is also doing quite well in the mainland. So apart from relying on the government, we should leverage the market forces to ensure enough support for INT enterprises. No follow-up questions. I'll now put this item, FCR bracket 2025269, to vote. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I believe the majority of members present are in favor of this proposal. This proposal is approved. Now we will discuss agenda item 3. I'll let the Vice Chairman to chair the meeting. This item invites members to approve the creation of a new commitment of $3 billion under the INT Fund Head 111, Innovation and Technology for the implementation of the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme. Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry, as well as the ITC, consulted the panel on commerce, industry, innovation, and technology on the 18th of February this year on this proposal. To address members' questions, we have again the Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry, the Commissioner for Innovation and Technology, the Deputy Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry. Now I will invite the Chairman of the Panel on Commerce, Industry, Innovation and Technology to report to us about the discussion at the panel. Thank you. The panel on the 18th of February 2025 discussed at its meeting the creation of a new commitment of $3 billion under the INT Fund to implement the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme. Members in general support the administration to submit this proposal to the Finance Committee for scrutiny. Members are concerned about the funding arrangement, funding area, project implementation, as well as monitoring and how R&D outcomes will be commercialized and applied. Members suggest that for expenses other than remuneration, the funding should be dispersed at a matching ratio of 4:2 instead of 4:1. That is, for every $1 secured by the applicant institution, the government will fork out $4. The administration said that it has to take into consideration institutions' affordability, and that R&D talents, after coming to Hong Kong, they can, through transforming R&D outcomes at the midstream and downstream sectors, attract more investment. The administration replied to members' concerns and questions at the panel meeting. Now I open the floor of questions. 16 members have asked to speak. I'll read out the names in sequence. Mr. Michael Luk, Dr. So Chuan Wing, Mr. Chen Pui Leung, Dr. Chow Meng Kong, Dr. Wendy Hong, Professor William Wong, Mr. Michael Tin, Mr. Chen Kin Po, Mr. Michael Lee, Mr. Chen Xiu Hong, Dr. Tan Yue Heng, Mr. Duncan Chiu, Mr. Kenneth Leung, Ms. Eunice Yong, Mr. Tang Fei, and Professor Priscilla Leung. This meeting is supposed to end at 6 p.m. I can at most extend this meeting by 15 minutes. I hope we can wrap up this item within this meeting. Mr. Michael Luke will go first. Thank you, Chairman. This Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme will involve a new commitment of $3 billion. I understand that frontier technology refers to advanced technology. Will the government take into consideration the possibility of the R&D outcomes being transformed and realized when it assesses the applications? For ideas or proposals that are too vague, we may not want to use public money to fund those projects. Also, the government is going to look at the academic achievements made by the top-notch talents. Is there a clear mechanism to ensure that we can attract real top-notch talents to come? Well, it's important to attract great top-notch talents. How can we ensure these talents will stay in Hong Kong? For example, how can we ensure that PhD students as well as postdoctoral research students can take part in these projects? 3 questions. First, on the definition of the scheme. Second, on the criteria that the tech talents have to meet. And thirdly, how can we support these talents? Secretary, I thank Mr. Michael Luke for the questions. I understand where Mr. Look is coming from by asking those questions. We adopt a targeted approach to try to attract talents. There was never such kind of program. I'm not sure whether there will be the same program in the future, but at this point of time, this kind of program is necessary. In Canada, $30 million have been spent on competing for talents. In the UK, £50 million were spent on competing for teams. It's called a relocation scheme. In the EU, 500 million euros were spent to trawl for scientific research team members. This is what has happened in the past few months. We are in a critical juncture of the development of our country. We urgently need to bring in outstanding talents, especially Chinese scientists. We need them to come to Hong Kong or go to the mainland. Frontier technology refers to those that can help us achieve breakthroughs, that can create a game changer. Hong Kong is an international city. Many talents are willing to come. We should make great use of our strengths to contribute to our country, and this is the historical backdrop. In implementing this scheme, the SAR government will have to rely on the existing platforms in Hong Kong, such as the 8 UGC-funded universities. Over the years, the 8 universities have had many successes in trawling for great scientists. We may not need the top-notch scientists now, but in the past we did not have a mechanism in place to help universities to compete for such talents. Neighboring cities, they are willing to spend millions of dollars to compete for such talents, and that's why talents went to those places. We were lagging behind. That's why we need a special platform and a special mechanism to resolve this. According to the paper, it is important to transform the R&D outcomes. It would be great if the outcomes could be transformed in Hong Kong, but it doesn't matter if the outcomes are transformed elsewhere. We encourage researchers to go to the mainland and realize their R&D outcomes, because we can then contribute to our country. Dr. So Chun-Wing. Thank you, Chair. I support this scheme. I believe that through this scheme, we'll be able to achieve what Professor Sun wants to achieve in INT. I have a question for the Secretary. In the paper, it is mentioned that there needs to be basic researches in frontier technology, and we need top-notch talents for that. My first question is, this is a $3 billion scheme. Are you going to focus on the projects or the talents? I think the government is focusing on trawling for talents just by reading the paper. You mentioned about top-notch scientists and research outcomes that are groundbreaking. Can we have both? You want both top-notch scientists and groundbreaking R&D outcomes. It would be ideal if we can have both. So my second question is, how can you strike a balance? Will you put in place a mechanism? Lastly, how are you going to select the project or team? With just $3 billion, of course, it would be great if we could achieve this. When this scheme is rolled out, I believe many universities will submit applications to try to secure funding from the government. So you need a mechanism to ensure that the money you put in will help you look for the right talent and project.
Thank you, Secretary. So how can we achieve the highest success rate? Thank you, Mr. So, for your question. It's indeed a good question. Well, whether we're targeting talents or projects, we are looking at top-notch talents. I already said out in the open earlier that we are looking into people-oriented projects. The 14th five-year plan has identified 6 frontier technology fields. Well, considering factors in Hong Kong, we want to be more realistic, and we have already identified the different fields, and we are now looking for top-notch talents to take these forward. Of course, we want to attract people to come in, and then they would work on projects, and actually people and projects can be seen as one. The second part of your question is, how do we assess, or what is the assessment mechanism? Well, these talents are actually recommended by UGCs. We are not trying to simplify the process by just looking at some dissertation papers. I'm sure that universities know exactly who would be such top-notch talents. We're just not talking about a couple of theses or papers. I'm sure that the UGCs would know exactly who the top-notch talents are, and then the remuneration for these talents would be slightly higher than other professors. From the perspective of the government, there would be a general assessment. We would look at the recommended talents on their merits. An easy way is to benchmark these talents. We would benchmark them against other top-notch talents or scientists in other parts of the world. So this is what benchmark means. Well, when that time comes, we will need to benchmark their talents. We want to trawl for the best talents. We are not going to try to want to delay any time. We want to do our best to attract talents to come over as soon as possible. So as I said, this is a very unique scheme. That this is actually a frontier technology scheme that is people-oriented. Thank you. Mr. Chen Pui-Leung. I'd like to ask about the assessment. The paper mentioned that there would be a task force to assess the applications. The frontier scheme could be universities in Hong Kong working together with R&D institutions. Well, a lot of the R&D teams would already be working on projects, and of course, and we wouldn't be able to recruit them to join the assessment team. Are we going to have enough people to do that in the future, or to be under this assessment panel? Currently, the funding subsidy is on a matching basis. In paragraph 24, it seems that the subsidies may be provided for all or part of the funding requested in an application. Are there any objective indicators on when subsidies would be provided in full or in part? All right, 2 questions on the constitution of the assessment panel and on the subsidies. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your questions. These are very good questions. The assessment panel will constitute experts from the government and from the academic sector. We are going to invite leaders or representative leaders from different sectors. They may not have to handle every single case. Only for some cases would we seek the advice of these experts. For example, let's say it's on life and science technology. Then we would invite a representative from that sector to come in. When there is a conflict of interest, then of course we would then seek the advice of someone else. There would be a mechanism for this. The government will take the lead to set up this steering committee and try our best to attract talents into Hong Kong. The Innovation and Technology Commission will act as the secretariat. On your second question, whether it would be full subsidy or part subsidy, the funding approved for each application would be around 100 million to 300 million. Well, let's say some would apply for only 100 million. It really depends on the cost and equipment needed. The secretariat and the members of the steering committee would then conduct a comprehensive assessment. Professor Chow Man Kong. Thank you, Chairman. We have heard the Secretary mention this talent scheme in different panels, and we hope that we would be able to support our universities in R&D. I would like to ask how it differs from the outstanding scientist scheme. It seems that 1 billion would be earmarked for AI. How do we ensure that we would not be overlapping in resource funding? We have identified 7 frontier technology fields this time. and there would be flexibility, or would there be flexibility for other fields as well? Because recently we've seen high achievements in fighter planes. Could we actually allow a flexibility to support other fields as well? The last question I have is on para 17. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, that retrofitting would also be included. All right, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Professor Chow, for your questions. On the outstanding scheme, we started working on that a few years ago. We wanted to try to attract 100 outstanding INT talents to come into Hong Kong. I'm happy to report that this scheme is towards its end, and we have sent out about 100 offers, and about 80 people have already moved to Hong Kong. And that scheme, however, differs from the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme. We are working on setting up the life and science R&D scheme, and whether there would be any overlapping or conflict. What I would like to say is that Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme would mostly be on startups, and that they're actually moving over to Hong Kong. So you would need to recruit students, and then to also to work in startup research, but that would not be large research projects. So when the talents come in and after they have settled down, they can still apply for any of our funding schemes, as long on the premise of that the frontier field not overlap with future applications. As I said earlier, you cannot apply for double funding for the same project. I'm sure all universities would also keep an eye on that. Third, on the different fields, we identified these 7 fields based on the 14th five-year plan. Hong Kong is focusing on 3 main sectors, such as life and science, on new materials, on new energy, including AI. We would also accept those because they're in line with Hong Kong's development. And last question, I think you've already answered. For renting a room for the project. Well, basically, Professor Chow's understanding is correct. We're not going to support them to build a new building, but if for their project, if they would like to do some sort of retrofitting, it's within the funding scheme. Thank you, Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you. Secretary, on the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme, I have 2 questions. One is on intellectual rights arrangement. The paper states that they would receive not less than 70% of the IP distribution. Is there actually flexibility? Let's say a private company is willing to invest in R&D and wants to take a higher share in the IP rights. Could you actually relax this? Second question is on the members of the steering committee. So where are you going to recruit these people? Let's say for deep space, deep earth, deep sea, and polar regions, or AI, or integrated circuits. For these fields, do we actually have enough local experts to form part of the steering committee? Are we going to recruit overseas talents to join our steering committee on these fields? Oh yes, the constitution of the steering committee has already been answered earlier. Let's see if the secretary would like to elaborate further.
对于这个
I thank Dr. Hong and Chairman. On IP, Dr. Hong said there might be enterprises that want to make more investments. Then how will the sharing arrangement be carried out? According to the paper, inventors or research teams should be entitled to no less than 70% of the IP benefits. For those who take part in the research or the research team, they will enjoy no less than 70% of the IP benefits. For those who do not take part in the research teams, can they get more IP benefits? It will have to depend on the investment ratio. Say some investments are made on IP, others are not. If the IP generated benefits are greater, then the IP benefits received by the investors will also be greater. Now, on the composition of the steering committee, we will include government representatives. We'll also invite outstanding representatives of the relevant trades and industry to join the steering committee. Dr. Hong is concerned whether we have talents for example, integrated circuits. We have talents for this. We also have talents in deep space. If necessary, we may consult experts from the mainland. We may also consider consulting overseas outstanding talents, but we'll have to be careful because trawling for talents is a sensitive topic. Professor William Wong, I am a staff member of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I support this scheme. Firstly, I want to see clarifications on this. In year 2020, the UGC rolled out the Global STEM Professorship Scheme. I think there's no problem with that. It's great that we have more schemes. I'm just wondering whether there are different KPIs for the professorship scheme and this frontier tech scheme. And what are the KPIs for the two schemes? Also, it is mentioned in the paper that apart from research outcomes, I wonder if there could be funding if the projects are successful. Now, on impact factor, on page 2, you have already included impact factors. As you mentioned that there will be cross-sectoral collaboration. Will you consider more collaborations between the project teams and the community organizations? Also, you mentioned about the National 14th Five-Year Plan in the paper. Well, the 15th Five-Year Plan will be released soon, so will you adjust your objectives based on the National 15th Five-Year Plan instead? Also, Talents who come may bring along their family members. Funding will be dispersed at a matching ratio of 1:1 if it is for remuneration for research talents. Will you adjust the ratio? Well, the question about professorship scheme has been raised. I wonder if the Secretary could elaborate. Now, I want to clarify that the professorship scheme is put forward by the ITIB, not the Education Bureau. The professorship scheme is coming to a close, and there are strong views that the scheme should continue. Well, we're not going to discuss this here today. What I want to say is that concerning performance indicators, the two schemes are very different. We put in different level of commitment for these two schemes. I believe Professor Wong is clear about that. As to whether we should consider providing funds by taking into consideration the impact factors. Say we are able to bring in top-notch talents. It's not enough to just rely on the funding for startups. They may work with universities and form teams with universities to apply for other fundings. I believe universities have been working with internationally renowned talents to implement different projects. Also, you made a great point that there will be the 15th five-year plan. Well, it is not released yet. That's why we're still basing our scheme on the 14th five-year plan. When the 15th five-year plan is rolled out, we will adjust our scheme based on that. Now, on the family members of the incoming talents, universities are crucial stakeholders under the scheme. They have to take up the responsibility with the SAR government to bring in top-notch talents. I believe universities will have resources ready to provide, for example, accommodation for these incoming talents. This scheme brought out by the government, it only supports the remuneration of the research talents. Mr. Michael Teen. The roundtable supports any INT investment program launched by the government. I raised a motion about AI and a reform on primary school and secondary school curriculum. How can we nurture talents since an early age? Well, last week I talked to Professor Sham. Professor Sum said it depends on how many top-notch talents we can bring to Hong Kong. AI may not be the only consideration for top-notch talents. Well, I think the talents are not only looking at money, but if they don't get any money or resources, they will not come. they don't look at CPU only, they look at GPU now with a greater computing capacity. So to carry out researches on AI, GPU is crucial. I understand that the XAR government purchased 1,000 GPUs, spending a few $1,000,000. If you can give each researcher 20 GPUs, it would be very appealing for them. 1,000 GPUs are only enough for 50 research talents. That's not enough. So will the funding be spent on GPU, graphics processing unit? That's my only question. Thank you. Secretary. I thank Mr. Michael Teen for the questions. This Frontier Tech Support Scheme is to attract scientists to come to Hong Kong, and the scheme will cover the building of labs. For AI professionals or scientists, they need GPUs, but $100 million is not enough. We already have a certain level of computational capacity. We can offer 5,000 flops of computing capacity. The AI R&D Institute started running last year, and by the end of this year, it can offer 3,000 flops of computing capacity. On top of the resources we have from the AI R&D Institute, they can get other funding from the government. 5,000 petaflops is not enough. Well, this is not the occasion to discuss this, but what I want to say is that this is a scheme to bring in scientists. The SAR government will offer all kinds of support to the incoming scientists. We will look at whether there are enough research projects to support these incoming scientists. Well, I asked about GPUs because research talents attach importance to GPUs, and all along we haven't had a lot of discussions at this council about the importance of GPUs for AI talents. I believe comment noted. Next, Mr. Chen Kin-po. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary always comes to LegCo for funding, and we always approve the funding proposal. Now I want to learn about the details of the scheme. You've identified 7 frontier tech fields. These 7 fields are the focus of many universities and institutes around the world. What unique advantages do we have with the universities and the scale of hardware and software we have? How do we compare with other world-class institutions? We are competing with others. $3 billion is not a small sum of money. What unique strengths do we have which make us think that we could outperform other institutions in the world? Now, oftentimes we have the secretariat handling all the paperwork for the government. This scheme will cover a lot of projects. Will you have enough manpower at the secretariat to deal with the paperwork? Also, do you have enough professionals to help screen and approve the proposals and applications? It takes a lot of time to vet applications. According to my experience, the Secretariat is crucial because it will help screen the applications and ensure that we have good proposals.
Or how do we stand out amongst other places, and how do we ensure that those that come over here will be able to succeed and the approval time it takes? Secretary, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Chan, our chair, and all members for your support in the past 2 years on innovation and technology. Well, although you are happy to approve funding, we find it very difficult to spend the money because, it seems although you're willing to approve our funding, sometimes we're not able to spend it well. Well, because sometimes it's very hard to approve the projects. So where is our unique edge in Hong Kong? I think in Hong Kong it is open, it is free. And 5 of Hong Kong's universities are ranked among the top 100 universities in the world. We see Hong Kong U, CU, HKUST, Poly U, City U. All these are ranked among the top 100 universities in the world, and this is a very important factor. We also have a very welcoming environment, and together with all this, it becomes very attractive for scholars and experts. Many people like coming over to Hong Kong, and they are willing to leave after a while. And with our 5 top 100 universities, then and with the support of the LegCo, you can see that INT has achieved huge successes, and I believe that we'll be able to attract top-notch talents from overseas, especially Chinese-speaking talents to come to Hong Kong. Your question is very good on whether the Secretariat can handle everything. ITAB actually do not rely on the Secretariat to assess. Actually, we do it all with a committee. Of course, the Secretariat cannot assess the applications. We work with universities because universities are our best partners. They know exactly what we need. And sometimes, for many of the cases, the university chancellors, in order to attract professors to come over, would fly over to meet with the targeted scholar. We do have an expedited mechanism. And that is the reason why I mentioned benchmark earlier. In a certain field, we do know who works in that field. Well, through benchmarking, we'll be able to know exactly the positioning of that person. And you'll also be able to, through benchmark, know exactly where this professor stands in our universities. As we are trawling for talents, of course, we hope to be able to recruit them as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chen Siu-Hong. The Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme seeks to attract international top-notch talents with a view to expanding Hong Kong's research capacities. As the Secretary said, it is in nature a talent scheme to provide support for universities to trawl for talents, and I'm in support of the scheme. The Secretary has mentioned that due to extreme measures adopted by the U.S. government, such as dismissing Chinese scholars and cutting funding. Many scholars are actually seeking work elsewhere. The EU has actually held a large conference and this week about 400 million Hong Kong dollars to attract IT experts to move over to the EU to continue their research. And our new commitment of 3 billion is actually a suitable time to trawl for these talents as well. Time is of the essence. We must, as soon as possible, trawl these talents over to Hong Kong. I'm sure that universities in Hong Kong would do their best to attract talents to go over to their university, such as providing them with a better accommodation and other facilities necessary. Would the government be giving rein to the universities to trawl for the talents and then just to provide support in expediting their visas? Or would the government also do something to help the universities in trawling these talents? I'm also very concerned with the Global STEM Professorship Scheme. I'm happy to hear from the Secretary that there has been 100 offers with 70 to 80 people already moved into Hong Kong. This is quite an achievement. Out of 2 billion, 1.7 billion has already been used. I'm not concerned with how you're going to use the remaining 0.3 billion. There are many considerations on whether to extend the Global STEM Professorship Scheme. Applicants for this scheme might come from one of these 7 frontier technology fields. If they're already in Hong Kong or about to come to Hong Kong through this scheme, can they actually switch to the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme midway? It is important to attract talents, but we also want to retain our talents. I want to hear from the Secretary whether these two schemes would coexist or whether you would consolidate these two schemes or to add in another scheme to provide support to those outside of these 7 fields. All right, so the first on the role played by Hong Kong universities, and second on the Global STEM Professorship Scheme. You might have to tell us more about the differences. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chen. On the first question, the universities and the government are the best partners. All along, I have been working with the universities to bring in outstanding scientists, including Chinese people and also foreigners. And the universities are very happy. They believe that this is of immediate help, and therefore the government will continue to work closely with the universities. With 10 or about 20 professors coming in through the Global STEM Professor Scheme, it is already an outstanding achievement. We do not have plans to allow application for the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme for those who have already moved here through the Global STEM Professorship Scheme. We want to attract talents to come in, to stay in Hong Kong, to set up startups, to retain talents. Then it is up to the universities on how to do that. They need to ensure that there is enough appeal for these talents to stay in Hong Kong. For those who are already in Hong Kong or have their application approved for the Global STEM professorship scheme, then they would not be considered under the Frontier scheme. Thank you. Next, Dr. Tan Yueheng. Thank you, Chairman. I support the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme. I don't think this is a talent scheme. It is actually a research scheme. Frontier Technology Research is very important, and as stated in the paper, we have 5 of Hong Kong's universities ranked among the top 100 universities in the world with strong capability in R&D. Therefore, frontier technology field research is one of our competitive edges in Hong Kong, and therefore we must further expand it. We do see many large enterprises setting up headquarters in Hong Kong and also setting up research institutes. Therefore, we are already seeing clustering of such talents. And our outcomes can actually be shared with the GBA, and this could actually create a synergy effect. A frontier technology is something important, and that we should continue to expand it further. Because if we talk about 30 or 10 projects to share the 3 billion, then it's not a lot of money. I hope that when our finances improve, we'll be able to extend it or expand the funding. I have specific questions on paragraph 14. Paragraph 14 said that if the research project fails to perform according to the terms of the agreement signed, the government shall be entitled to terminate the agreement early and to recover related funding. Terminating an agreement would not be too effective because you might not be able to recover funding. So I believe a better method is to prevent such from happening. The second question is based on paragraph 26. That if the amounts of actual contributions from the applicant institution is less than that committed in the application, the funding will be reduced correspondingly. Well, this shows that, well, if they are not up to standard, it means that when we approve the application, we already allow them to be irresponsible, to commit less contributions. We want to ensure that the frontier scheme could go ahead. It's very difficult to recover funding. And there is a certain risk in that. How can we actually consider this fully and to ensure that this wouldn't pose a risk? Well, this is very realistic. I think we should prevent this happening instead of terminating the agreement. Secretary, thank you, Dr. Tan, for your support. You have quite a strong understanding on the scheme, and I thank you for your reminder. I would like to defer this question to the Commissioner. Mr. Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Tan, for your question. Well, as mentioned when we were discussing the previous item, research has a lot of uncertainties. Well, ultimately, we would look at whether the work has been reasonable. The research team might not achieve the expected result after research. We would invite them to amend their plans a bit. We would only terminate the agreement under extreme circumstances. The same principle can be applied to the second scenario. They might have sought matching funds, but then the funds contributed may be less than the approved amount. We would give them time as long as they notify us earlier, time to seek other funding. Well, of course, if they engage in illegal activities, of course, we would have the discretion to recover dispersed funding, but that would only happen under extreme circumstances. Oh, yes, I'm sure, because their reputation is on hand. All right, next, Mr. Duncan Chiu.
作為
Thank you, Chairman. As a representative of the tech sector, I welcome this scheme because it helps fill the gap. I think within over the past few months, I have met with 10 odd top-notch professors and research teams that are interested in coming to Hong Kong. I have 3 suggestions. First, we have the 7 frontier technology fields identified. I think we are leaving out blockchain here. I think we should include this with the development of fintech. I think we should include blockchain technology. AI and blockchain are 2 major tech fields that we have to focus on. Of course, we have to leave room for the universities to make their considerations, but if you do not include it in one of the fields, will they leave it out? Secondly, on assessing the applications and proposals, I don't think we necessarily have to have the applicants focus on all frontier tech fields. For some fields, there might be more applicants. And it might be a good thing because we will be able to draw a lot of professors and researchers to come with those fields. So I don't think we have to be so rigid with the criteria. We don't necessarily have to ask the applicants to cover all these frontier fields in their proposals. Thirdly, it's mentioned in the paper that the reputation as well as the status of the researcher or talent will be considered. I think there could be some flexibility here. Say, for example, for some projects in the mainland, they ask Nobel Prize winners to join. But does it necessarily make the project stronger if we have a Nobel Prize winner participating in the project? Now, benchmarking could be another consideration, as mentioned by the Secretary. We could have a top-notch talent. We could also have an emerging talent. And the 2 could be at very different stages of their career or development. Secretary, 3 suggestions. We have identified 7 frontier tech fields based on the National 14th Five-Year Plan. We are following our country's direction with the 3 other major fields that we're focusing on. In total, we have 10 major frontier tech fields. There might be controversies if we keep adding new fields to our focus. Now, data science is one of the fields that we focus on in Hong Kong. Take fintech as an example. We have to look at what kind of technologies are supporting the development of fintech. We are talking about basic researches here. So we need to have technologies that focus or support basic technology. So we will look at the technologies to be applied in the basic researches. Now, I said that there are 10 fields, 7 plus 3. Apart from focusing on the fields, we look at the quality of applicants. For some fields, we don't necessarily need groundbreaking researchers. So we're not trying to cover all the frontier fields. It really depends on the quality. Thirdly, I totally agree that we should consider the reputation of the research talents. How long have they been engaged in researches? And have they really been engaging in those researches? I have been in touch with university heads, and they are in their 40s or 50s. They may not be very famous or world-renowned, but they have great potential, so we will consider all kinds of talents. Ms. Eunice Yong, I support the 3 billion frontier tech field scheme. I have questions about the 7 fields as well, and I am aware that the government will take into consideration the reputation as well as the status of the scientists concerned. I agree that if the scientists who come cannot be committed to the research team, it may not necessarily benefit the city. Can there be more than one scientist for each project? You will look at the project outcomes as well as the level of commitment of the research team. Can a scientist be replaced by, for example, a research team? Say, can we have a whole team from the mainland that's professional to come to Hong Kong to help universities here to carry out the research projects? Now, I understand that you will look at the financial sustainability of the projects before you approve the projects to make sure that it will bring benefits to Hong Kong. How do you quantify the benefits that may be brought by the project? Do you look at the economic efficiency, or do you look at whether the project will help Hong Kong develop into a smart city? What criteria will you adopt when you assess the applications and when you approve the applications? The first is whether you will invite or welcome a whole team of research talents, and secondly, how do you quantify the benefits? Thank you. We mainly look at the leading scientists. Of course, we welcome scientists to bring in the entire team. This is the difference between $100 million and $300 million. For a team with student assistants, we will have to offer more support. We will look at the actual circumstances. Say we have 2 scientists who are very close to each other and they submit 2 applications for 2 different projects. There's no problem to that. There may also be scientists who engage in full-time jobs here for a while and then they move to the mainland for further development. We will welcome scientists from all over the world to come to Hong Kong, and they can then move to the mainland. Again, there's no problem to that. We'll have to look at the economic benefits that they are going to bring to Hong Kong. We're talking about scientists engaging in frontier technology. They will have to spearhead groundbreaking projects. If these projects can benefit the high-quality development of our country, we'll definitely welcome them to go to the mainland. This is a cross-disciplinary scheme. I've been looking at aerospace technology, and I wonder if there are relevant laws in Hong Kong that could help us lead in this regard. How can you allow more faculties from universities to take part in the scheme? What will you take into considerations when you decide whether to approve a certain project? Secretary, of course we welcome and support cross-disciplinary projects. We want top-notch scientists to make breakthroughs in one core field. It could be a very focused project, which may lead to groundbreaking results. So it's not that we only welcome cross-disciplinary projects, but if you can engage in that, of course we welcome it. Mr. Tang Fei, it is a scheme with strategic value. My question is this. You're talking about competing for top-notch talents, and now the US is boycotting Chinese scientists. What matters is how the high-end research outcomes can dovetail with the development of Hong Kong and our country. We have to look at IP benefits. Say there are Middle East countries that manage to attract many top-notch scientists to their science park. They do not need local researchers or local university students, and their IP is not registered locally. What mechanisms will be put in place to ensure that after these top-notch scientists come, they can bring about research outcomes that are in line with our country's strategies? If we are clear about the benefits we want to create, it will be helpful. As mentioned, the UK, Canada, and other places are all competing for talents. How can you ensure that talents will come? How can you ensure that we have the attractiveness? And how can you make sure that the research outcomes can be transformed into what we need? Transformation of R&D outcomes, and how can you make sure that there will be not a lot of restrictions for scientists.
其
I think there are many considerations from the end of the talents choosing to come over to Hong Kong. Well, one being that they want to actually develop in the Greater Bay Area, and they would want to transform their success into commercialization. Well, I always emphasize that this industrialization, of course, would be one of the main factors that the researchers would look into. And we, of course, would encourage and support this development. Talents coming in would be working full-time in Hong Kong, and the IP rights, of course, would then belong to the universities. IP rights are important everywhere, in China, in the US, and when they want to apply for patents, then of course they would consider where exactly they want to register it. We always encourage good patents to be registered all over the world, and not just to stick it into their safety box and then just leave it there. We do have an unique edge in Hong Kong. Many Chinese who have been living overseas may choose to come back because this environment is quite familiar to them. Or there are still 4 members waiting to speak, with Mr. Dennis Leung being the last one. Members who wish to speak, please come down as soon as possible to press the speak button, because I am planning to conclude this item today. And then I would also draw a line very soon. Professor Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to hear that some members have changed their attitude. I remember last year when we talked about 10 billion for Race Plus. I remember saying that this was not a large amount of money. But now today, with the development of IT in the past year, members now know that we must be visionary and pioneering in considering IT development. I, of course, am in full support of the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme. Today is the golden age in talent trawling. President Macron made it very obvious. The mainland is also looking for similar talents. Even Tsinghua University wants more talents to join them. If our scheme cannot support talents in furthering their research to try win a Nobel Prize, then we must try to work together with the mainland. We don't want our funding to be only like 40,000. That's really a tiny sum. I'd like to move on to more concrete matters. In para 14 of the paper, it is stated that when the leading talent departs during the project, the government shall be entitled to terminate the agreement early. Well, we have seen foreign judges leaving their posts early. which may bring in difficulties. I therefore believe that we must come up with a contingency plan to ensure that in case such an occasion rises, we know exactly how to follow up on that. And on paragraph 11, it is stated that the scheme will not mandate the projects to be interdisciplinary. But then paragraph 22 states interdisciplinary cooperation under the performance indicators. My question is whether the administration can provide the percentage of interdisciplinary cooperation. And when a project is outstanding yet is not interdisciplinary, would that affect the performance? Well, there has been a similar question on the leading talent departing early during a project, and the other question is on interdisciplinary cooperation. Secretary, thank you for your question. As I said earlier, interdisciplinary will not be a requirement. We encourage it, but we do not enforce it and mandate it. As for the second question on contingency plan, I understand that we do need a contingency plan when the talents come over, but due to certain circumstances, they are not able to continue. I'm sure that we would come up with a plan for that. These people actually will be working in Hong Kong full-time, and therefore we do have some sort of stability. All the expenses would be made in Hong Kong, and therefore they would for sure be staying here as they're working full-time. Mr. Benson, look, thank you, Chairman. I also support the Frontier Technology Research Support Scheme. As the Secretary said, we need to fight for research projects and at the same time also draw talents to move over to Hong Kong to further their research and work. I think we are actually have stepped up the first step and to try to come up with a funding policy. In paragraph 14, when leading talents depart during the project, the government shall be entitled to terminate the agreement early. Of course, we do not hope the leading talents leave early during the project. However, the support for leading talents would only be limited to remuneration and health benefits. That would not include accommodation, education benefits, and food subsidy. However, when other countries call for talents, they might also include that in the package. Does the government or maybe the universities have a better package for talents, or at least to make them stay for a minimum of 5 years? In paragraph 15 of the paper, we see that the ceiling for each project may be about 300 million. Running for 5 years. If you divide it out into 5 years, that also include remuneration and other benefits, we're not talking about a large amount of money. Would there actually be flexibility that when you see this or a certain project being high potential, would you actually allow flexibility to apply for extra funding during the project? Well, after Dr. Johnny Ng and Mr. Dennis Leung speak, then I will move on to the other matters of this item. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. And we see today that many members have expressed their support in the scheme, and many have made it clear that the funding seems inadequate. I am very happy to hear that. One of the reasons why we want to work with universities is to offer a better package for their talents, and that they could spend all their time in their research. I'm sure that the universities, much like how they are providing for other professors, would provide them with similar treatment, such as housing subsidy, education subsidy, etc. I'm not too worried about this because all universities hope to attract the best talents to their schools. I am sure they're willing to follow up on these packages. And with the support of the government, then they would have a stronger incentive to trawl for international talents. The second question on whether there needs to be an increase from the 100 to 300 million amount. Well, as a start, I believe that we have already been doing quite well. We are calling this, well, for these scientists or talents, this is only an initiation stage. They would for sure work with other universities to apply for other funding via different platforms. Thank you, Secretary. Next, Dr. Johnny Ng. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I express my support for the scheme, and I'm happy to see the government working very hard to attract talents. This is like a breakthrough to see the government attracting talents instead of projects. Well, many members have mentioned one point which I'm not going to repeat. Well, based on my observation, I have a question on considerations of talents moving to a different country. First of all, it's money. Then it's the overall environment. I've asked many entrepreneurs and scholars, and many have said that family members are equally important in their considerations. They want support for their children, and also want visas for their parents. My friend, around the age of 50, 60, have parents at a very old age, around in their 80s. But it's impossible for them to acquire visas for their parents. Let's say a scientist wants to move over with the entire family, yet not able to acquire a visa for their elderly parents. Is there anything we can do to help them? Well, some other members have asked a similar question on family members. Secretary, thank you for your question. There's actually a special task force on education support that many meetings have already been held to discuss one topic, and that is a special policy for special circumstances. please be rest assured that there would be full support for talents if they decide to move over. All right, last member to speak, Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chairman. On supporting Hong Kong to become a INT hub, I am in full support, and I'm happy to see new ideas or new thoughts on INT development. The current matching fund subsidy will be provided on a matching ratio up to of 1:1 for applicant, institution, and other funding. We see high investment from the government, but we want to see return on investments. Well, for research that could actually become a product with IP registration, that would be of very high value. I've asked in the panel that when there are high returns on the project, how much bonus or dividend would the government receive? In paragraph 10, we see that 70% of the IP rights could actually belong to the research teams or investors, and that 30% would belong to the university. The government hasn't said that how much of the IP rights would belong to the government. Our tax bracket is very small. If we do not receive certain benefits, then it will be very hard for us to sustain our finances. There is now a new scheme under the Housing Authority on a housing project, and there have been actually a few entrepreneurs working on it, and they actually enjoy free rent for 7 months on this Well-being Startup 2.0 program. Most important thing is that they actually get bonuses, because when these entrepreneurs make a profit, then bonuses or 20% bonus would be given to the government. How can we use that to encourage more entrepreneurs to invest in the well-being project then? It is actually quite a positive way of encouraging entrepreneurs. Therefore, I want to know whether you would keep certain IP rights. But today, the government still has not come up with an answer. I don't want to hear the government say only that they are looking into it. We see new development in IT, but we want to see return for members of the public as well.
A question about the benefits for the government. Secretary. Well, in terms of the benefits to be received by the government, well, I'm afraid that my answer may disappoint Mr. Dennis Leung, because this scheme is not to ensure or guarantee the IP benefits to be received by the government. It is a very targeted scheme. We should not just focus on Hong Kong. We need to look at it from a greater perspective. That is how Hong Kong can integrate into the country's development. We have to ensure that there are frontier technology projects that are groundbreaking. We're not targeting to benefit the 7 million people in Hong Kong, but the 1.3 billion people in our country. Of course, it would be great if the R&D outcomes could be transformed in Hong Kong. That'd be great. But if they want to do so in the mainland, we will also support that. We have to look at the entire INT ecosystem. Some wonder if we should support basic researches carried out by universities, even though we might not get any returns. My take is that we should support those programs. We have 5 world's top 100 universities in Hong Kong. We are a financial center. We have the 8th center position. This is an important brand. We should not underestimate basic researchers. Basic researchers can help draw in talents. We see an increase of 10% in terms of jobs created by the INT sector. So we have to put in more resources in the upstream sector to develop the INT sector, while the midstream as well as the downstream sectors are equally important. We have subsidized 100 production lines under the new industrialization program. According to the latest statistics, in year 2023, we saw an increase of 7.6% of GDP for the new industrialization and manufacturing sector. It accounts for about $76.8 billion. We have about 4,000 startups in Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong focuses on basic researches, but it has injected impetus to the ecosystem in Hong Kong. Over the past few years, 30 Hong Kong centers, together with 30 world's top universities and institutions, have collaborated, and they nurtured 500 some talents. They published a few thousand theses and also 1,000 some patents. In the middle of last year, one of the technologies was applied within the government. Earlier, we invited DPO. We asked the LegCo as well as the Secretariat to make use of the AI-assisted technology. We hope that by the second half of this year, we can roll out the mobile version of Hong Kong Guy. What I want to say is that it looks like we are not earning or receiving returns in a certain area, but we have to look at it in a broader perspective. Yes, overall return, we got it. Now I will put FCR bracket 20252610 to vote. Will those in favor of the proposal set out in the paper raise their hands? Will those against please raise their hands? I think the majority of the members present are in favor of this proposal. This proposal is approved. The next FC meeting will be held on the 16th of May 2025. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.